I moved into the neighborhood with a sense of hope and a craving for peace. After years of city chaos, inaccessible apartments, honking horns, and endless sidewalk cracks that made my wheelchair a daily frustration, I finally found a single-story house with a ramp already installed, wide doors, a sun-drenched backyard, and, most luxurious of all, a small in-ground pool with a privacy fence. The place had been a hidden gem on the real estate market, overlooked perhaps because the prior owner had been elderly and the backyard overgrown. But I saw potential. I saw freedom. I saw a place where I could live without always feeling like the world had been designed without people like me in mind. I'm paraplegic, the result of a car accident 10 years ago. I've heard every patronizing comment, every misguided compliment, every awkward stare. But I stopped caring a long time ago. These days, I wear what I want, go where I please, and use my voice loudly if someone tries to step on my rights. So that morning, when I wheeled out to my newly cleaned pool deck wearing a turquoise bikini and oversized sunglasses, I felt not only comfortable in my skin but triumphant. I had fought hard for this. Every inch of independence, every brick of this house, every stroke I swam. The sun was beaming down, and the soft trickle of the water jets soothed me as I reclined in a chaise lounge with a book in hand. I just finished adjusting my Bluetooth speaker to play a mellow playlist and applied another coat of sunscreen when I heard a sharp ahem from beyond the wooden gate. I blinked and looked up, confused. I wasn't expecting anyone. Then came the voice, sharp, pinched, and unmistakably hostile. "Excuse me? Yes, you. Are you the new homeowner?" My brow furrowed. Who the hell was just shouting into my yard like that? I wheeled over to the gate and opened it slightly. There she stood, the very image of suburban menace. Mid-50s, platinum blonde helmet of a haircut, oversized sunglasses perched low on her nose, a clipboard in one hand, and an expression of pure judgment in the other. "I'm Karen," she declared, as if that meant something. "Head of the HOA. We need to talk about your appearance." My blood ran cold, not from fear, but from the rising heat of fury. "My appearance?" I echoed. "Yes," she said with a sniff. "It's about decency. You can't just sit out here in that, where people can see you, especially children. It's inappropriate." I blinked. "I'm in my backyard, wearing a bathing suit, at my pool, on a sunny day." She shook her head with exaggerated disappointment. "There are rules about public decency, and that includes things visible from the street. You're sitting out here, practically naked. It's a bikini." I cut in. "Like the kind people wear to, swim." Karen folded her arms. "You need to understand that this is a family neighborhood. People don't want to see things like this, especially not from someone in your condition." There it was. Not even 10 minutes into meeting her and already she'd gone there. I rolled my eyes, trying to keep my calm. "My condition? You mean my wheelchair? Or is it my disability you have a problem with?" She didn't even flinch. "It's not about that. Don't twist my words. It's about maintaining standards in this neighborhood. If you insist on being so exposed, at least have the decency to cover up in public view." I pointed to the solid 6-foot fence around my yard. "This is not public view. It's my private property. And what you're doing right now is trespassing." She sniffed again, unmoved. "Well, if you won't listen to reason, perhaps the police can explain it to you." And just like that, she pulled out her phone. I stared at her, stunned. "You're seriously calling 911? Because I'm sitting at my private pool? In a bikini?" She ignored me and started dialing. My heart pounded, not out of fear, but indignation. I couldn't believe this was happening. I wheeled over to the table, turned on my security camera monitor, and made sure the recording light was blinking. Karen was on speaker now, her voice suddenly a shaky victim's plea. "Yes, hi. I'm in the Willow Creek subdivision and I'd like to report an indecent exposure situation. Yes. There's a woman. She's disabled, yes, and she's sitting in plain sight, exposed, yes, wearing a bikini. It's very disturbing. Yes, children could see it." She was painting me like a predator, and I couldn't help but let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. You're lying, I said loudly enough for the operator to hear through her speaker. I'm in my private backyard, in swimwear. This woman has entered my property without permission. Karen hissed and turned away, moving back outside the gate as if that magically erased her trespassing. I'm just trying to uphold neighborhood values, she spat. You're trying to enforce your bigotry, I shot back. And now you've filed a false police report. My voice didn't shake. I was mad, sure, but I wasn't scared. This wasn't the first time someone had underestimated me, but it was the first time I'd had the tools to fight back in real time. The call ended, and she stood there with that smug little grin of hers, as if she'd finally put me in my place. They'll be here soon, she said triumphantly. We'll see what they have to say. I didn't answer her. I just rolled back to my lounge chair and waited. The police arrived within 15 minutes. 2 officers, both looking more confused than concerned. I met them at the front door and explained the situation. I invited them into the backyard and showed them the camera footage, which clearly showed Karen yelling over the fence and then pushing the gate open to march into my yard. The younger officer glanced at his partner, then back at me. So, you were sitting by your pool, in a bathing suit, on private property, and she called to report indecent exposure? I nodded. Correct. He sighed. Ma'am, you haven't done anything wrong. Karen, who had crept up behind the fence to eavesdrop, interjected. But I saw her. It's not about the wheelchair. The officer turned. Ma'am, it's not illegal to wear a bikini in your own backyard. And unless you have legal cause to be entering her property, you could be cited for trespassing. Her face turned a violent shade of red. This is outrageous. She's just trying to make trouble. People like her always play the victim card. My jaw clenched, and before I could respond, the older officer stepped forward. That's enough, ma'am. We've documented the call and the footage. Any further harassment will be considered a civil matter, and possibly a criminal one depending on escalation. Karen turned and stormed off, muttering something about how she was just trying to protect the children. The younger officer turned back to me. Sorry about all that. Some folks let a little power go to their head. I thanked them, and once they were gone, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I rolled back to the pool and sat there for a long moment, soaking in the surreal experience. It wasn't just about the bikini or even the wheelchair. It was about control. Karen couldn't stand that someone like me, disabled, confident, unashamed, was living a life she couldn't dictate. She needed me to be small so she could feel big. But that wasn't going to happen. Not today. Not ever. I looked down at the turquoise fabric stretched across my hips and chest, at the wheels gleaming beside me in the sun, and I smiled. This body, this life, this peace, I had earned it, and I wasn't about to let anyone like Karen take it away. But of course, I knew deep down she wouldn't stop here. People like Karen rarely do. She'd try to use the HOA to get at me, to chip away through policy and paper instead of trespassing. And I would be ready. I had fought systems bigger than her before. I had faced years of doctors, lawsuits, discrimination, and even my own doubts, and I came out stronger each time. If Karen wanted a battle, she'd get one. But I wouldn't fight it with anger. I would fight it with truth, documentation, and an ironclad resolve. Let her bring her rules and her outrage. I had something better. The law, the facts, and my dignity. I turned up the music again and reclined in the sun. The pool sparkled, the water inviting. I dipped my toes in, then wheeled to the edge and lowered myself in with practiced ease, letting the cool embrace wash away the lingering heat of the confrontation. Karen might have tried to shame me, but I felt no shame, only strength, and I had a feeling the rest of the neighborhood was about to learn exactly who I was. The sun had barely set on that chaotic day when Karen called the police on me, and already the fallout had begun to take shape, like a bruise blooming under the skin, slow, dark, and inevitable. After the officers left and I had settled in for the evening with a stiff drink and a quiet playlist, I thought maybe, just maybe, that the worst was over. But I should have known better. People like Karen don't accept defeat. They plot their next move like chess grandmasters, manipulating pieces in the shadows while pretending to protect the board. The next morning, I rolled out onto the front porch with my coffee, savoring the stillness before the world fully woke up. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. Subject line, Violation Notice, Willow Creek HOA. I already knew who was behind it before I even opened it. The email, drafted in suspiciously Karen-esque language, claimed that I had committed a visible act of public indecency in violation of community standards, citing vague HOA bylaws about proper outdoor attire and visual disturbance to neighborhood peace. I almost choked on my coffee. Not only was the accusation absurd, but it was built on a lie that had already been debunked by the police. Still, here it was, an official notice, complete with a $500 fine and a warning of further action if the inappropriate behavior continued. I sat in stunned silence for a long minute, rereading it, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less offensive the second time around. But no, it was exactly what it seemed, an attempt to shame, intimidate, and control. Not through screams over the fence this time, but through bureaucracy. I wasn't surprised, but I was furious. The email gave me 7 days to either pay the fine or dispute the charge in front of the HOA review board. My immediate response was laughter. Not the amused kind, but the sharp, disbelieving kind that's one breath away from fury. Karen had clearly realized the police couldn't be used as her personal morality squad. So now she was exploiting HOA policies to try to police my existence. I took a deep breath, rolled back into the house, and opened my laptop. I compiled the security footage from yesterday, clipped the part where Karen trespassed and where the police told her she was out of line. I also started digging through the HOA documents that had come with my welcome packet, the bylaws, the community rules, the property agreement. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to build a case so airtight that if they so much as whispered the word indecency again, they'd be swallowing it with a cease and desist. As I dug into the bylaws, a pattern began to emerge. Vague language, subjective standards, and far too much discretionary power in the hands of the HOA board, especially the president, which I now knew to be Karen. Of course, she was not just a board member, but the president. No wonder she was so emboldened. This wasn't just about me. It was about the broader abuse of power she wielded under the guise of community standards. I spent the next few days gathering evidence. I took daytime photos of my yard from the street, proving that the privacy fence effectively blocked any clear view of the pool area. I printed out the full HOA agreement, highlighted the lack of any specific dress code regarding swimwear, and compiled articles about disability rights and housing discrimination. I even reached out to the city's Office of Fair Housing to inquire about whether the HOA's actions could be considered harassment or discriminatory under the Fair Housing Act. Their answer wasn't definitive, but it gave me enough confidence to believe I had grounds to push back, and hard. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't subtle in her escalation. I noticed her SUV parked at the end of my block more than once, idling as if she were surveilling my house. A couple of her cronies, likely fellow HOA board members, began walking their dogs past my fence more frequently, whispering and occasionally peeking over the slats like nosy teenagers. But I didn't rise to it. I smiled, waved, played my music a little louder, and wore that same turquoise bikini every chance I got. If they were going to try to break me with shame, they were going to fail spectacularly. On the day of the review hearing, I rolled into the HOA office early, wearing a sleek navy blue jumpsuit and wheeling a messenger bag full of evidence like a lawyer heading to trial. The room was small and utilitarian, more like a DMV than a courtroom. A long folding table dominated the center, with 3 HOA board members seated behind it. 2 men I didn't recognize and Karen, who sat in the middle like a queen on a plastic throne. She wore a blouse too stiff for the occasion, and her fake smile crinkled at the corners with smug anticipation. "We appreciate you coming, Miss Daniels," she said, her tone syrupy but laced with condescension. "Let's get started, shall we?" I nodded, calm but locked in. She began by summarizing the alleged violation, claiming several neighbors had expressed concern over my attire, that it was visibly inappropriate, and that it constituted a breach of community decency. When I asked for the names of these concerned neighbors, she demurred. We don't disclose complainants for privacy reasons. Convenient. When she finished, she folded her hands primly and nodded at me. You may respond. I opened my binder and passed out copies of the photographs and camera footage, along with a copy of the police report summary I'd requested under open records. As you can see, I began. The incident in question occurred on private property, behind a fully enclosed privacy fence. My swimwear was consistent with what any resident might wear at a pool. The only person who viewed it was Karen, who trespassed onto my property, uninvited, and called the police with a fabricated claim of indecent exposure. I watched one of the men shift uncomfortably as I flipped to the next page. The police found no violation, confirmed my right to wear a bikini on my own property, and cautioned Karen about further complaints. Karen's mouth twitched, but she said nothing. I continued. Furthermore, the HOA bylaws contain no specific language about what qualifies as proper attire in private spaces. And even if they did, enforcing such a rule selectively, especially against a disabled resident, could be interpreted as discriminatory under the Fair Housing Act. That last line landed like a punch. One of the board members cleared his throat and leaned forward. Miss Daniels, are you saying the HOA is discriminating against you based on your disability? I met his gaze. I'm saying that the HOA, under Karen's leadership, has targeted me using vague standards that are being weaponized selectively. The only difference between me and any other woman in a swimsuit in her backyard is that I'm in a wheelchair. And that, gentlemen, is the very definition of discrimination. For a few seconds, silence hung in the room like smoke. Then Karen straightened, her voice sharp with feigned indignation. This is ridiculous. No one is targeting anyone. We're simply enforcing neighborhood standards. I raised an eyebrow. Then enforce them fairly. Show me one other citation you've issued for someone wearing a bikini in their own backyard. 1. She faltered. That's irrelevant. No, I said quietly. It's not. It's the entire point. The room shifted again, the mood palpably tilting in my favor. Karen knew it too. Her eyes narrowed, and her smile vanished like fog under sunlight. She turned to the board members. Let's move to a decision. But this time it wasn't unanimous. One of the men, the same one who had been shifting earlier, spoke up. Actually, I'd like to review this material more closely before voting on any fines. Karen opened her mouth to object, but the second board member nodded in agreement. Yes, let's table this and revisit it next session. In the meantime, I recommend waiving the fine pending further discussion. I packed my materials slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact with Karen. Her face had gone pale beneath her makeup, and for once, she was speechless. When I left the office, the air outside felt fresher than it had in days. I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end of it. Karen still had influence, and people like her rarely back down permanently. But I had thrown a wrench into her plan. I had exposed the pettiness and the prejudice for what it was. And most importantly, I had stood my ground without flinching. That evening, I received an email. Your citation has been placed under board review. No fines are currently due. We will contact you regarding the next hearing date. That was a win in my book. Not just because I'd avoided a bogus fine, but because I had made it clear I would not be bullied, silenced, or shamed. I shared the story on my social media, including the video footage and a brief summary of events. It wasn't long before the post began gaining traction. People were outraged. Friends shared it. Advocates commented. A few disability rights pages even messaged me for permission to repost. One tweet read, "Disabled woman shamed for existing in a bikini. Fights back. Queen energy." I couldn't help but laugh. Later that week, something unexpected happened. A woman I'd never met knocked on my door. She introduced herself as Maya, another resident of the neighborhood, and handed me a pie, an actual homemade pie, still warm. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "for standing up to her. Karen's been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. People are just afraid to say anything." We sat on the porch and talked for nearly an hour. She told me stories. Karen ticketing a man for leaving his recycling bin out too long, scolding a couple for too much laughter during a birthday party, even confronting a teenager for skateboarding too loudly. Karen wasn't just an overzealous rule enforcer. She was a petty tyrant hiding behind policy. But now, for the first time, someone had pushed back, and the community was noticing. More neighbors started waving when I rolled past. One man honked and gave me a thumbs up as I watered the garden. For the first time since moving in, I felt not just tolerated, but supported. Karen might still be scheming, but the tide was shifting, and I was just getting started. The date of the HOA hearing arrived like a slow-rolling thunderstorm on the horizon. Ominous, inevitable, and charged with tension. And by the time I wheeled myself out of the house with my files and footage packed in my bag, I could feel the electric hum of confrontation in the air. I wasn't afraid, not really, but I was alert, aware that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about principle, about standing up to the creeping tyranny that people like Karen built one petty rule at a time. I had spent the last several days preparing everything down to the last comma. I had consulted with a disability rights attorney who confirmed what I already suspected. The vague and selectively enforced policies the HOA used could absolutely constitute a Fair Housing Act violation, especially if they were being weaponized specifically to target my mobility impairment. With her guidance, I had drafted a formal complaint that was ready to be mailed to both the local housing authority and the Federal Office of Fair Housing, should this hearing go south. But I was holding that card close to my chest. For now. I also had witnesses lined up. Neighbors like Maya who had come forward after my story circulated, eager to speak against Karen's reign of pettiness. One even offered to appear via Zoom if the board allowed it. The hearing was to take place in the community clubhouse, a beige and bland building that resembled a dentist's office more than a center of neighborhood governance. As I approached, I could already see a small crowd forming outside. Not just the usual board cronies, but regular residents too, curious faces with raised eyebrows, folding chairs, arms crossed. Word had clearly gotten around. I didn't shrink from their attention. I rolled in with my head high, my spine straight, my shoulders squared in a loose linen blazer and black jeans, ready for whatever nonsense was about to be thrown my way. Inside, the long table at the front was again dominated by the board, only this time the cast had expanded. 5 members now, with Karen sitting dead center like the eye of a hurricane. To her left sat the same 2 men from the last hearing, and to her right were 2 new additions. One, a lean and stern-faced woman with reading glasses perched low on her nose, and the other, a bearded man with an expression that danced somewhere between bored and bothered. Karen gave me that thin-lipped, insincere smile as I entered and gestured toward the guest chair, which had clearly not been designed with wheelchair users in mind. I didn't say a word. I just rolled myself to a position in front of the table and pulled out my folder. The room quieted as the meeting was called to order. Karen began with the same mechanical formality she used last time, but this time there was a sharpened edge to her voice, like she'd spent the last week sharpening her claws. We are here to continue the review of a violation issued to Miss Daniels regarding conduct unbecoming within the Willow Creek HOA community. She paused, glancing down at her notes before looking back up. Due to the increased concern and visibility of this issue, and the spread of misleading social media content regarding the incident, we have expanded the board to include full review and advisory members. I wanted to laugh. Misleading social media content? My post had been accurate, documented, and factual. The only thing misleading was her attempt to rewrite the narrative with her tired martyr complex. But I held my tongue. The room was watching. Karen continued, "We have also received letters of concern from other residents regarding the public nature of online discussions that name our community in a negative light." Oh, so that was it. She was mad because I told the truth and people were listening. I let her speak, uninterrupted, even as she gestured at a folder full of printed screenshots of my social posts, as if that proved anything except my right to free expression. Then it was my turn. I calmly passed out new packets to each board member, this time including not just the original police footage and photographs, but also statements from 4 neighbors who had witnessed Karen's harassment or had experienced similar treatment. One testified to Karen issuing a fine for their daughter using sidewalk chalk. Another had been berated for having wind chimes that were too loud. A third claimed Karen demanded they paint their fence a slightly different shade of beige under threat of legal action. My final exhibit was a 2-page legal summary prepared by the disability rights lawyer outlining potential violations under the Fair Housing Act. "This isn't just about a bikini," I said clearly, my voice echoing slightly in the room. "This is about a pattern of weaponized policy enforcement being used to target, shame, and isolate residents, particularly disabled ones, under the guise of maintaining community standards." I looked each board member in the eye, pausing at Karen for a fraction longer. "And it's about leadership that believes they're above accountability." Karen scoffed but didn't interrupt. I could see the tension tightening around her shoulders, like a coil about to snap. The woman in glasses raised her hand slightly, like a judge. "Miss Daniels, this summary here references Section 804 F2 of the Fair Housing Act regarding failure to provide reasonable accommodations. Are you asserting that the HOA citation could fall under this law?" "Yes," I said, nodding, because the citation was not based on any clear, universally enforced rule. It was based on the discomfort of a single person who trespassed onto my property and then used her authority to issue punishment in retaliation. The only difference between me and any other resident sunbathing at their pool is that I use a wheelchair. That's ableism. And it's unlawful. The room was silent again, but this time it was contemplative, not confrontational. Even the bearded man looked up from his papers and made eye contact, the first sign that maybe, just maybe, I was getting through. Karen, for her part, went on the defensive. "We are not here to debate federal housing policy," she snapped. "We are here to discuss whether or not your conduct met the standards of our community charter." I didn't miss a beat. "Then cite the clause I violated." Word for word. Karen blinked, thrown off. She flipped through her binder, stammering something about public decency and disruptive behavior. But the woman in glasses cut her off. "Karen, I've reviewed this charter multiple times in preparation for today's hearing. There is no clause that specifically prohibits swimwear or poolside attire on private property. Unless Miss Daniels was blasting music or causing a disturbance, which police have already confirmed she was not, there's no actionable offense here." Karen flushed, clearly flustered. "Regardless, we need to consider the tone she's setting for the neighborhood. The way she flaunts herself online." "Excuse me," I said sharply, my voice now tinged with heat. "Did you just say I flaunt myself because I exist in public spaces while disabled and unapologetic?" I asked. The room went still. Someone muttered, "She's right." Karen, the HOA president, was flustered. Before she could finish her rebuttal, the bearded man on the board cut her off. "Karen, sit down." That moment changed everything. He proposed dismissing the citation against me and launching a review into Karen's leadership. The motion passed. Karen abstained. My name was cleared, and the board promised a written apology. I left the hearing to applause, Maya waiting outside with iced coffee and a proud grin. But I knew Karen wouldn't vanish quietly. She still had influence, and I had to stay vigilant. A week later, residents voted overwhelmingly to remove her, 138 to 14. The apology letter was cold and lawyer-written but included everything we demanded. Withdrawal of violations, recognition of rights, inclusivity training, and a refund of HOA dues. I took it as a symbolic win. To mark the moment, I threw a party. Liberation by the pool. Everyone was invited, even those who once sided with Karen. Maya and I decorated with rainbow bunting, flamingo floats, and a massive inflatable sign that read, "Access denied and no more." The food truck served tacos and churros. The DJ played Lizzo and Queen, and laughter echoed across the neighborhood. People brought dishes, shared stories, and felt at ease. People brought dishes, shared stories, and felt at ease. The Patel family even said they were finally free to speak up. Then, I saw her, Karen, standing stiffly at the edge of the sidewalk, arms crossed, trying to reclaim some imaginary control. I raised my glass, smiled, and turned away, surrounded by a community that now saw me not as a nuisance, but as a leader. The real victory came afterward. I helped launch the Willow Creek Inclusion Alliance, hosting workshops, creating accessibility guides, and running events like Day in My Wheels, where residents experience life using mobility aids. Even Mr. Thompson, once annoyed by ramps, changed his tune. Change was slow but real. Karen eventually put her house up for sale. No one missed her. The new board president, Carla, a former teacher with a hearing aid, led with fairness and invited me to join an inclusivity subcommittee. I accepted. I started writing, speaking, and connecting with disabled people nationwide who had faced similar discrimination. I reminded them they had power. On the one-year anniversary of the incident, when Karen called the police on me for sunbathing in my bikini, I threw another pool party, Accessiversary. It was bigger, with food donations, a live-painted mural, and speeches from residents. I gave a short talk. This pool was once the site of an attempted erasure. Today it's a celebration, a reminder that none of us are invisible. We ended the day dancing by the water, to Elton John's I'm Still Standing. That night, after the crowds had gone home and the DJ had packed up, I sat on the edge of the pool with my feet dipped in the cool water, the sky full of stars and the scent of sunscreen still lingering. Maya joined me, handing me a slice of leftover pineapple upside-down cake, and we sat in silence for a while, just soaking it all in. Finally, she broke the quiet. You know, she said, I think this neighborhood finally gets it. I nodded slowly, smiling. Yeah, and if they forget, I'll be here to remind them. She laughed, nudging my shoulder. You're like a bikini-wearing Batman. I grinned. Exactly, but hotter. We both burst out laughing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. Justice had been served. The neighborhood had changed, and I, bold, proud, disabled, and radiant in my pink bikini, had not only survived, but helped shape something better in the ashes of ableism. I was no longer the woman Karen tried to shame. I was the woman who answered with strength, community, and joy, and I wasn't going anywhere.